Hi everyone, my name's Hayden Scott-Baron. I'm currently a lead designer at Microsoft. I have been working in games for quite a while, since about 2003. And some of my earliest games I was working on were the Rollercoaster Tycoon 2 and 3 games, and working on Lost Winds, and as well as a little bit of Cave Story, and doing a bunch of illustration work for companies as well. I later moved into game design, where I worked as a lead designer or senior designer on a number of titles, including more work on Rollercoaster Tycoon, Zoo Tycoon, Kinectimals, Planet Costa, and Jurassic World Evolution. I also worked on some independent games, which went on to be finalists at the Independent Game Festival and winner of the Unity Awards. At the moment I'm working at Microsoft, and I've been working, in addition to my my design work, my game design work, I'm working a lot with the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and some of their projects where we are trying to do STEM-themed events to introduce science, technology to children, especially at a critical age where they are often left behind. So I've been supporting and helping at events like this, where children are taught how to program and make games and introduced into technology through games. So it seems like it should be a very simple question of what is kindness, but unfortunately, yeah, if you've ever been on the internet in the last, 10 years, you'll probably see that it's somewhat lacking. So yeah, we talk about kindness and it's being a behavior that's marked by concern or consideration for others. So the best area to find this is, of course, the comment section of any website. So yeah, any comment that starts this way is going to be good, which is the quote of, "Why do you guys care so much?" And this is, "Care so much for games which are absolutely unappealing to 99% of all gamers. Who cares for the nth positive representation of LGBT? Were there ever negative ones? What about a million other niche illnesses, affinities, wants, and frivolities? How come my obsession for eating lots of Twinkies every night is not represented?" So yeah, this is PC Gamer with their comment section. It didn't take very long to find this comment. This may as well be on every article. So yeah, let's talk about niche illnesses, affinities, wants, and frivolities. So this was a comment on Brianna Leigh's Butterfly Soup, which is a visual novel. It's a very personal story about basically her experience with queer relationships, especially as a teenager. Meanwhile, right above it, we're talking about Call of Duty, so it's not as though this is all at the exception of what are still regarded as core games. So many of us are familiar with these lines of, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And this is a quote which often floats around Tumblr and inevitably is sourced as Buddha. Of course, it's not Buddha. It's actually a poet from the 19th century. But if you're not sure, you can always assign it to either Buddha or Einstein, or both. So let's talk about who actually plays games. So whenever we're trying to be future thinking, we always love to kind of consider the children that are playing games, and kind of which is so far the kind of the almost like an ideal audience because it's not yet been ruined by too many comments on the internet. Yeah, it's really important to care about what are still regarded as the the core demographic, especially if they're wearing a really good T-shirt like this. And it's important to consider that games are only part of like someone's life. They're not the entirety of their life. So you may be playing games with your friend, and what you're actually doing there is you're doing some like light entertainment whilst making sure that you're still close to the people that you care about. It's not something I expect that would be the obvious caption for this image, but I think it's a very important one to consider. And this is because games are only a tiny, tiny fraction of any one person's life. They will always have dozens and dozens of other hobbies or frivolities you might consider. So yeah, so if we could take the previous commenter, for example, this may be the way that would be welcomed home after a trip, and to have a lot of people in their life that they have an impact on outside of games. Their reach into the world isn't just the PC gamer comment section. But it kind of ignores that maybe his sister suffers from fibromyalgia, and maybe some other people have some things that they have to worry about. And yeah, these other niche illnesses, affinities, wants and frivolities, many of which will be kind of unknown by the person at the time, and they will basically have to suffer and figure it out as they go along. So, yeah, games obviously have a huge impact to some people who have sorry. Yeah, who currently have no choice but to live in a difficult situation. But everyone in this situation is important, not just the person that's in hospital, but also the people around them and the people that are caring for them. So when we talk about disabilities, yeah, it's very easy to kind of stick someone in a disability box as something they are, like this is a disabled person. Whereas basically, almost everyone at some point or other has a moment where they are situationally disabled or temporarily disabled. Even something as simple as if you are holding a cup of tea is actually a situational disability. It means that you can't use your tea drinking hand until you put it down. And this seems like a trivial thing, but it's a really important one to consider, because if you enable something for someone that wants to drink tea whilst they play, then you can also include all of these people just through, just by being considerate and compassionate. So, sorry, I just had to include this image. So yeah, I often think of like situations like this, and it should be a tender moment, but it's very easy to just imagine this on the internet with the caption of just come on, baby, you can do this. Like, how hard can it be? I've been doing this for years. So, yeah, accessibility definitely has a kind of negative connotation amongst a lot of gamers. It is often used as something to worry about, because there's concern that it's going to take away from a core tenet of what is currently game design. So yeah, this image tends to be thrown around quite a lot, and it's often used as an example of the problem with what is defined as equality. Because if everyone gets equal treatment, then it's not actually equal result for everyone. And a game that people love to talk about when it comes to accessibility is Dark Souls by From Software. This is an incredibly difficult and it's a very difficult game with very limited telegraphing of information, which I'm trying to avoid using too much jargon here, but basically what it means is they don't show you very much about the what's happening on screen, and instead they rely on your kind of like your spreadsheet of knowledge of all the different weapons it could be and how many milliseconds that the reaction time should be, and a lot of that comes from either your personal reaction time, your physical reaction time, your experience with games, but also some things which are not anyone's fault, which are if you bought a TV from like half of the places that sell TVs, a lot of them have things like input lag, which means that your reaction time will naturally be slower. It's nothing to do with anything that you've done wrong, you've just bought a TV. But a game that is designed in this way will always be extra difficult for a lot of people. So this is a light gun game called Virtual Cop 2 from the mid-90s. And in order to tell which enemy is about to shoot, they use a lot of icons on screen. And the reason for this is this is a very fast, twitchy game, but also they wanted it to be clear as to which person you should currently be attacking, and also the timing of when they will be attacking you. So games like Dark Souls, if they wanted to keep the gameplay completely the same, they could consider more graphical telegraphing of the events rather than just awareness of that particular animation cycle. So, yeah, let's read this in full. This is a talk about one of From Software's more recent games called Sekiro, which is of course very similar in that you have to just read the animations to respond to them. And PC Gamer did a feature about using cheats to play through it, and one particular commenter decided to share his thoughts with this. You cheated not only the game, but yourself. You didn't grow, you didn't improve, you took a shortcut and gained nothing. You experienced a hollow victory, nothing was risked and nothing was gained. It's sad that you don't know the difference. So, inevitably, the internet turned this into a meme and they had a lot of fun with it, but it's really important to consider that this is the recurring kind of like resistance to a lot of accessibility that we see in game design, and it's causing a lot of friction for game designers as well. So Nintendo for a long time have tried to look into different ways to make their games more accessible. And one of the more recent methods has been to include an optional item that you can pick up if you have failed at a task repeatedly for a number of times. So this is very interesting because it's completely optional, and if you complete it with the item, it even flags your kind of like save as a different color of save, so you can decide to come back later and do it without the item. So you can choose how important it is to involve you, but inevitably this really infuriates people, the fact that it exists, because the moment they get the item pops up as an option, they feel like they've been insulted by the game. So yeah, which led to a lot of places like Penny Arcade and others dealing with like this in a slightly frustrating manner because they see it as nothing but a slide. They can't see any sort of gains from it, despite the fact that it's a real opt-in situation. They've chosen to use the item, but they will resent it, and then they will grumble about it on the internet. So, and of course, all the commenters and everything else. And the actual screenshot I got was someone referring to how Nintendo have smeared his fond memory of the Tanuki, which is, I'm not sure about Tanuki smearing, but this is what you can expect to face if you basically try to be more considerate with the way you build your game. So, Mario Kart 8, the Switch version, has a little aerial on the back of every car by default. And what this does is if you steer too far into the edge, it will slightly steer you inwards to make sure that you don't just drive off the side of a cliff. And the interesting thing about this is that a lot of people don't actually notice it's on because they have played a lot of the game and they just drive in the middle of the road. It did lead to a lot of hardcore gamers who are angry that it existed, and especially angry that it was on by default. But the interesting thing about it being on by default is that going into the settings menu is actually quite a hardcore gamer type of thing to do. It requires a certain amount of technical understanding of the game. So it's more like choosing to take off all the kind of safety equipment when you get anything. And it also led to another result, which are people that were using it, people who are basically hardcore gamers, using the assist mode to play the very hardest, the very fastest mode in the game. And the game is still very, very difficult because there's plenty of challenge despite that. And this is just to catch the rare case where the car would have otherwise just driven off the road. So, I won't scroll down to the actual comments below this because they're exactly what you'd expect. But it's kind of good to see that there is some sort of glimpse of where people who are hardcore gamers are actually appreciating that even once in a while that they actually benefit from these things. So, a lot of the talk about assist mode has actually, and accessibility in the last couple of years has been from a game called Celeste by Matt Thornton and his company. This is an incredibly difficult 2D platformer, incredibly hardcore, and difficult in a very traditional way. But the interesting thing is that they built a number of assist options into it. They're not the first people to do this, but they're certainly the first ones to kind of make it so prominent as part of the initial start of the game. And the idea of making accessibility options more vivid means that we get away from the stigma of putting them in the settings and kind of in a slightly shameful way. So, the same person that grumbled about the Mario Kart option was actually very positive about the way that Celeste was handled. So it is definitely an area where, as developers, we're always kind of trying to do better and trying to improve and seeing what we can do with the medium. So, the assist mode itself, it has a number of messages at the front of it, but ultimately the important one that it talks about, it says, assist mode allows you to modify the game's rules to reduce its difficulty. This includes options such as slowing the game speed, granting yourself invincibility or infinite stamina, and skipping chapters entirely. So one of the one of the interesting things about the way it was implemented is that even with all the kind of like all the hard work and care that went into putting a mode like this, there's still a few missteps, and it's kind of on the developer to see how they respond to those missteps. So when you play the game, your save file like has a label on it as to whether or not it's assist mode or other things that you've done. So the interesting thing is that people tried out assist mode, but then they realized that their save file was labeled as an assist mode save. So they started to feel like the game kind of like put a stamp on them and kind of like labeled their gameplay as less valid in many ways. The previous example from Mario managed to avoid this by, on a case-by-case basis, on each level they would label whether or not you use the assist item, and that's a really, it seems like a minor detail, but it's actually really critical because it means that a player can come back later on and choose to get over the one particular hurdle or like the particular challenges that mean something to them or seem like something they can do with a different situation. So the developers actually responded to this by simply removing the assist badge when you turn off assist mode. It's quite simple. It just means that the save file is just not, there's no stigma associated with the assist mode. It's just a temporary option. So looking back at the diagram we saw earlier, it talks about how to get over the fence and deal with the fence. But the ideal thing would be for there to be no fence, and it's such a difficult thing to face in development because so much of game development is about using the existing methods and habits of game design and the way that games were previously built. So it is often considered unwelcome or disruptive or just generally bad to throw away something which is part of games right now. But in many cases, there are parts of games which are there for legacy reasons or for poisonous reasons. One example is we've often got rid of lives as a concept in video games. It's just a kind of like, it's a throwback to old arcade games, but it took about 20 years for people to realize that we didn't need it. And there are still things from the 90s which exist in games that really shouldn't be there, but no one's really found a good, like an elegant way to get rid of them. So yeah, part of my time at Microsoft has actually been giving me a lot of awareness of some of the other work they're doing outside of games, such as Project Torino, which is a set of tools or toys to allow children to learn how to code. They can string together these plastic objects, and they create code loops or subroutines or coroutines, and they can do very simple coding with them. And the really fun thing about them is that they have speakers and microphones, so that the way that the code, the way that the programming works is actually through sound. So when the program is running, it's like playing a melody that can change depending on what the user has done. So the really fun thing about this is really good fun for children, but it's through inclusive design, it manages to avoid anything which would make it inaccessible to blind people. So rather than designing something for blind people, they're actually designing in an inclusive manner to bring everyone into this. And yeah, we see a lot of this. We see a lot of cases where environments are designed to be enabled for blind people, but they actually have a lot of benefits for sighted people as well, such as floors where the path is marked with bumps or a different texture, where it turns out that everyone benefits from this because we can tell exactly where we're stepping. So one of the things that people imagine when I say I work in game design is that every day is just playing a fun game, and whereas a lot of it is going to bat for some pretty mundane things. So this is one of the interfaces from Planet Costa, and the Planet Coaster has a lot of like building tools so people can build their own environments and roller coaster parks. Now the critical part of it is the little box in the right-hand side. And so this is an additional panel control that allows you to change the kind of current settings that the object uses to move around. For a long time during development, these were all done with keyboard controls, because a lot of us amongst the developers were very used to this type of interface from 3D graphics software or other types of like development software. And by moving it onto the control panel, we were able to make sure that the game was playable by users that only had use of one hand. And so for the entire duration of this game, whenever I played it, I never used my left hand. That was one of my rules. And this meant that part of my job was simply to pay attention to whether we'd broken our rule and if we could nip that in the bud. And by paying attention and wanting to have this as a core tenet of the game, we managed to ship a game that someone can play regardless of whether or not they have access to both hands, or if they want to enjoy a delicious cup of tea whilst they're playing. So sorry, 1 second. Yeah, one of the things that we keep on considering is the use of vocabulary and terms and words, and we often in games love to throw around words like crazy and as though it doesn't mean anything. And there's a lot of history from this, but there's no reason to continue it with a new product. So when we talk about diversity and inclusivity, the important thing is that they're not exactly the same thing. The idea is that diversity talks about the fact that everyone is individual and different, whereas inclusivity is the fact that you are respected, valued, and supported, not in spite of your differences, but because of your differences. So Animal Crossing is a wonderful game. I've been playing for a long, long time, and slowly but surely it's been adding more in the way of inclusivity, where it allows the male characters, for example, to wear the female clothes and to generally be quite good for self-expression, especially considering it's a game that children can play, but also it's good for adults. And it's also a game which is incredibly good for self-care. The general calming atmosphere of it means that players can use it to relax and kind of like calm themselves, and it's a very low pressure game. And Celeste is another game which deals greatly with mental illness. The entire story is an allegory for mental health and overcoming the struggles of mental health, which is, yeah, a really good and beautiful thing, but still, unfortunately, can, because it's so important and delicate and personal to a lot of people, it can go wrong. So unfortunately, the Japanese version of the game, because the developers were unable to read the localization, it ended up using a what is basically a slur with the equivalence of the R word. Oh, well, yeah, I think you can see the important bit of this, which is, yeah. And the developers had no way of knowing that this would happen. All they could do is like try their hardest, keep on listening, and respond to criticism. Nobody likes to be criticized, no one likes to make mistakes, but we all do. So it's really important to just kind of like, yeah, take it on the chin and keep on listening and adjust. So yeah, they have since changed the Japanese localization to fix these problems, and yeah, and it's also informed a lot of developers to try to be extra careful with localization testing in the future. So speaking of Animal Crossing, yeah, Animal Crossing is good in so many ways, but it really fails when it comes to racial diversity. In fact, the really frustrating thing is that they have a skin tanning system built into the game, but they don't let you choose a different skin tone. It's just designed for what they consider to be like Japanese and Caucasian skin, which has this kind of like tanning quality. But yeah, if you are black, then you are out of luck. Yeah, The Sims for many years has come under fire for its poor representation of black hairstyles and even skin tones as well, like some of the details. So there's a large modding community which has grown out of The Sims, where people have worked really hard and made assets and shared assets based on the way that they look and feel. And a lot of this it's a failure on the part of The Sims, but it's also a positive aspect of the modding option and the modding menu, which is in The Sims. And the latest version of The Sims did a lot of work, and they finally removed all the gender restrictions and other restrictions on the character types and hairstyles to basically allow a lot more customization, which has been received really well by the fan community, and is a really encouraging moment for these types of games moving forward, because The Sims has a huge amount of impact on other games. So this was actually the first game I ever worked on. I was just an artist at the time. I worked on the expansion pack for Rollercoaster Tycoon 2. Nothing to do with the design, nothing to do with anything else. And this is a very widely regarded old game. But if you look closely at the game and you look at the people in the game, even though they're small on the screen, it basically looks a lot like Reddit. It's a lot of white guys with brown hair. And yeah, it's not great. Some of the characters, if you click on them, they may have female names, but they are all exactly the same sprite. So so my first job was basically to design all the characters for Rollercoaster Tycoon 3, and they had to be super duper low poly and like very ridiculous, like kind of over exaggerated kind of shapes and features. So so I was able to do a few things. I wasn't able to change like the restrictions on what types of genders and other things that we had, but I was able to make sure that we had 16 skin tones that I was very pleased with, and also a number of different hairstyles. So even with a very simple game that came out in 2003, I was able to do this. And one thing which is really significant is that the work I did in that game continues to be something I'm proud of, because the game has been re-released and reissued a number of times. So the kind of message there is that the work you do in your earlier roles, or whenever you have a small amount of influence, may end up sticking for quite a while. So yeah, do try hard, but also do review your work. Do scrutinize the mistakes you make. And this is a mistake I made. I could have probably pushed back if I had thought about it, if I had thought about it more. But the staff members in the game were all male. You have a security guard, an inspector, a mechanic, and a janitor. Even the janitor is male. And so you go, okay, well, where are the jobs for the women in this theme park? Oh, don't worry, we put them behind the till. So yeah, this is the only women that we had in Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 when we launched it. Not the best, not my proudest moment. I mean, I wasn't 100% in charge of that, but I was partly responsible, so I would like to put my hands up. But even I knew that this was a mistake at the time, and did what little I could when we came to add a safari park expansion pack. So I go, okay, right, finally we can have a female character. Suffers from many of the problems that female characters do, which is, skinny, etc. But everyone's skinny in this game, apart from the janitor. That's a whole other thing. I wanted to get body types into the game. They were pushed back, not because of, well, for technical reasons, like because we were very limited in terms of RAM, but it was a very frustrating thing to have pushed back early on. But yeah, so talking about the female animal keeper in Rollercoaster Tycoon 3, it seems like a good thing to have a female character, staff member in the game. But then I'm less happy when I consider that basically this is her job, which is to scoop up animal poop. So it's not necessarily the most empowering role for women to have a choice of working behind a till or to scoop up poop. So yeah, we can always do better. And yeah, let's do what we can. And I was also responsible for the 2D illustrations in the game. And so one of the things I was keen to get is to get a black girl on the title screen, as well as the mandatory white person. And I made sure I had some black characters as some of the kind of like the mini graphics and some of the black families and things like this. But it wasn't. There was lots and lots of missteps, and I'm still not entirely happy about this awkward Egyptian white girl person. I don't know really what I was thinking. It's a bit Liz Taylor. And also, the biggest mistake was the fact that my icons just have what was sometimes referred to as skin tone color, but it's basically a bunch of white people. And it kind of, it does betray a certain bias. So I had a lot of best intentions, but best intentions will only get you so far. And it's very important to review what you did and go, yeah, if I did that again, I would probably do a little bit better. So there was a decent amount of like diversity and different makeup in the game, but there's still a lot of areas to improve. For example, we had these like rigid family groups, but gender was fixed and like the family makeup was fixed. But since then, the same company, Frontier Developments, went on to make Planet Costa, and that game introduced LGBT characters and gay families and adopted children and a whole bunch of other things, which inevitably there were some grumbles on the internet, but we owned it, and I was quite pleased to be a part of the design team for the game. I wasn't in charge of the art, but I was very pleased with the art team for following through with this, even and it does show that people that want to achieve something down the line, they can revisit it and do better. So yeah, just to wrap up, let's talk about how to be kind. We need to keep on listening. We need to lend our voice to people who don't have a voice, and to be the change you want to see in the world. A lot of us have a bigger impact than others, but everyone has more of an impact than they realize. They can talk on Twitter, or they can talk to their family, or they can just speak up when someone quotes something from a newspaper that is lies. So, yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for coming today. And yeah, if you have any questions, I have a few minutes for questions as well. So, yes, please.
What was can you remember a first time that a game was unkind to you, that you realised this should be different?
Let's see, that's a good question. So, yeah, I think so. It's actually a lot of the unkindness in games is death by 1,000 cuts. So, a lot of games will have an aggressive emphasis on scoreboards or timers. And there was one game called, I mean, this isn't the first time, but certainly one which really stuck with me, because by then I was like being very critical of it. And it was a game I struggled to get through the levels, but I really enjoyed the levels of it. And then whenever I got to the end of a level, it would tell me it would give me a ranking based on how fast I did. Yeah. And then it would tell me the score, and then it would tell me my online ranking. Basically, yeah, take any sort of wind out of my sails, like to the point where the worst moment of the game was exactly where it ought not be. Where I was really happy to struggle through this level for half an hour in what was, you know, the end of a stressful day, and then the game says, "Yeah, you're useless." And yeah, that was very frustrating. There's, I remember there being some other online ranked games where they thought it'd be a brilliant idea to tell me that my score is like 23,000 on the leaderboard. I'm like, don't tell me I'm 23,000 on the leaderboard. I don't need to know that. Yeah, and we even see this type of mistake made in like non-gaming things. Like I like to run, but I'm bad at it. And not too long ago, I took a little bit of break from running and picked it up for the first time. And the running app told me, congratulations, this is your 215th fastest run. I'm going, that's not really much of a compliment. That's like, you know, if you went into any place and said, you are the 215th hottest person here, you'd be like, wait. That's yeah, it's a very peculiar type of negging. So yeah, and games are riddled with it. And we take it for granted because a lot of the games are designed around this kind of like top 50 players, and they're the ones that get coddled. Whereas in actual fact, we should be caring about the thousands and thousands of other people. Great. Well, thank you very much.